You'll be able to read it. It's readable. It's very readable.
Some Tosfots are. Usually the longer ones are easier.
Yeah, because they repeat. And they bring in some. Poor thing with the long Tosfos is not to take everything so seriously. Sometimes they just bring in fall guys, or there's kind of meandering a little bit and all that.
Yeah, I can do meandering though. That's
Okay, we're looking at two necessary Tosfot. The first necessary Tosfot is on Kuf Tet Amud Bet.
all right.
And that is Kuf Tet Amud Bet. First Tosfot relates to our important Rashi. We'll quote Rashi. I just right now, with 10 seconds ago, 20 seconds ago, asked Joel to read it. Let's try it out.
All right. Eno over alav mutar. This is the statement of Rav's that Rashi was commenting on. Piresh bekuntros demutar im bishlo mishum dechalav shchuta derabananhu. Right. V'hai kevan de ivla below piresh afil isur derabanan leka. All right. That's all the Rashi that we read before.
Right.
Mashma shiratzeh la'amid kula shmatata dekechal letzli. Right? So Rashi is making this whole thing that we've learned about Sali, right, which we saw. Right? Because if it's in the Kedera, then we saw that the milk's going to come out, it's going to come back and be reabsorbed. And that's the problem. This is Yalta, I believe, who says this is either blow up or hang the kachal. Upiresh bekontrus behavadai bitsalihu midikatani mutar. Dibikdera amai mutar hayatsa chalav v'chazar v'nivla. Okay, so that's all proof that Rashi thinks that he's making a kimp. This whole thing is about tzali. So, ulakaman batar shmatata.
But he's also takes the notion of yatsa very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that he does, I just like Tosfos. Usually when Tosfos summarizes Rashi, he does so in such a nice way. He does it as if he understands Rashi, which I guess he does.
Might have even gotten it right from the mouth. So it's for all we know. So, but all right.
Come on.
Ulakaman batar shmatata de kaved. Piresh bekontros v'hilchot kechal kvar amarnu lamala detzali bai kriya sheti o erev. Right, this is the better version. And in fact, I think I had a note that said that Tosfot agreed with that. V'ilo krao mutar kelishta kama derav dehat tanya kevate. All right, ukudera koro sheti ve'erev v'tacho bekotel. All right, and that's the end of the Rashi there. Okay.
Right.
And when
it says Sfarim, what does he mean?
It's the reef, isn't it? I can't remember.
I think it just means.
Is it just the Gemara?
Other Gemaras, copies of Gemara that he had in the they had 5 copies, so one of the 5.
All right. Kechal atzmo asur. Hecha delak kra'e uvashle bahade bisra. La Garcianle, right? Defino bashle lechude asur, the pirusha contrast, the fisha piresh vechazar v'nivla. All right, so there's some versions of the Gemara, some versions that say that if you didn't rip the kechal and you cooked it with other meat, right, that's asur. And he says no, it's even by itself, and so we don't read behade bisra with that. So. All right. Umiha gam leferusha kontros hecha deika shishim b'mayim shnipashel bahen hakechal lo haya nesar kechal hecha shebishlo lechude lefisha chalav haniflat nitpatel b'mayim. Right. And so, how do we construct the whole case of the 60-1 then? Right. Or maybe even with the kechal.
Yeah.
Right. That's in a pot by itself with a lot of water, and so the milk becomes batel to the water.
In the list of variables, I didn't put the shishim. I think I didn't put the shishim because it felt like such old hat. We know that already, kind of.
Yeah.
But the thing to add to the shishim is the notion of it could be shishim mayim. It could also be shishim mayim with vegetables and a kanedol or whatever. But what the shishim, what's important is that it's not busted. That's what's important. Okay. Avahecha.
Avahecha debishlo im basar asur mishum tam basar anivla bechalav, right? Shebekachal, right? But if you cook it with other meat, that's a problem because it absorbs the milk, right? That came from the kachal. וכן יש ספרים דגרסי בסמוך ככל שבשלו בחלבו, מותר היכא דבשלי לחודי, below basar, right? But there's other versions that say, right, that if you cooked it by itself, it's mutar, right? As long as there's no other basar there. ויש להעמידו לפירוש הקונטרוס, שיש במים שישים כדפרישים, שמתבטל בהן חלב היוצא מן הכחל. And the way to understand that is that must be because there's a lot of mayim again that is to which the milk is mitbatel.
Okay. So what does Tosfos emphasize in terms of his understanding, or what he feels the proper understanding is?
I mean, is that for bishul, this is like we almost treat this as if it's like a, real milk, essentially. And there might be with the, we do treat it like it's real milk. With the kachal by itself, with a lot of water, then maybe the liquid gets absorbed and is batel because it's a lot of water to the little bit of milk. But if it's with other meat, that's basar b'chalav, and that's a problem. So, and even the kachal by itself, if there's not a lot of water, that's basar b'chalav. And it's maybe not deraita, but it sounds like derabanan. It's a major problem.
Okay, good, very good. Okay, now we got a second Tosfos, so I'm going to spring on somebody to read. I'm sorry, but Noam, I want everyone to look at it on the same daf. Kuftet on the bet towards the bamahu l'kedera. Actually, not on the bottom. It's Kedera. Oh my God, where did I have it? Oh, sorry, I lost my spot.
Can someone remind me? I feel silly about this, but the rules of chalav, like bitul of chalav and basar, the shishim. I'm a little confused about the distinction here being made about it being in basal versus it being in not basal, like alone.
Rav Nachum, can you help us?
Well, I think that when the milk comes out of the kachal, they're kind of uncertain if it's chalav shchuta still. Now, there's chalav shchuta in its classic sense is that it's in the flesh of the meat, but any milk that comes out of the animal when it's alive is for sure milk. So here we have a case that's kind of in between because it was in the flesh of the animal when you slaughtered it, but it did come out. So maybe it's a little bit like milk in that sense. It's like an in-between state, and they're not sure about exactly what the halacha should be. And they're thinking maybe we have to treat it like it is really milk because it did come out. And that only really becomes apparent, that's the way I understand it, that only becomes apparent when there's other meat there, when that milk is coming out and going into other meat. But when you just cook the chachal by itself, it's not apparent that any milk came out. Maybe it just stayed in the chachal, and then it still stays as chalav shchuta. But once there's other meat there, then why are you forbidding the meat at all? Why are you even thinking about other meat? It must be because it's coming out, and then it becomes similar to milk.
And it can't be batel? Is that what it's saying?
No, it can be batel in 60. No?
Yeah.
It can be batel in 60. But if you don't have 60 is the problem.
Aha.
It does sound here though, this Tosfot, that it's like if it's water and vegetables, then 60-1 is fine. But if it's
right,
if it's other meat, it sounds like there's no beetle going on.
That's what I'm confused by, because it says it can be bottled in 60 in water, but aval he could be shlo in basar asur.
I think the assumption is that there isn't 60 against it. In other words, you're not going to have 60 against the kachal. Who is going to have that much meat?
Well, but I guess, but who's going to have that much water? Like it's more likely that you'll have that much water, and that's what it's assuming?
I assumed that the water has to be against the milk.
Well, hecha the bashlim im basar asur.
But we never
mishum-
know how much
No, isn't
thing
that
is
the
coming
whole,
out
we
of
get the
something, right?
chumrah, we get the chumrah from the chal of the fact that you have to like nishaer b'kulo because you don't know how much has come out of it.
Right.
Yeah, no, good point.
You have to measure against the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And once you're measuring against the whole kachal, you're gonna need a lot of meat. You need 60 times the kachal. But if you have water, I mean that's one way. But he does. There is one thing that bothers me a little bit in the language. He says, "Mishum tam basar hanivla b'chalav."
Yeah.
It sounds like he mean what basar? What basar and what chalav? The basar is the basar from the udder itself, the udder
Right.
meat into the milk, and then it's like min b'mino. Is that what he's saying? Because Rashi.
Well,
Because
go ahead.
Rashi does hold that min b'mino is
Yeah.
asur la'olam.
I was afraid to go there. Okay.
I don't know what he
yes.
exactly means. I
Yeah,
don't know exactly why. That's, yeah.
Okay. I do want, where was I going to remind us? Well, the kachal is real meat. And that's one of the reasons why as real meat, we can separate kachal from the milk that has been within it. Because in terms of meat, it's real meat. In other words, we don't consider it, on one level, we consider it basar b'chalav, not really basar b'chalav, we consider it basar b'kachal, because it's a drabanan. We consider it basar, but on the issues of beetle, we would consider it basar, and therefore it can add its weight into that factor. So there's more to say, but I'm going to leave it here because I want to finish tonight. I want to go to the Tosfos near the bottom of Sari Ahula Kedera, or at the bottom. And I need a victim. Noam, volunteer. Thank you.
Sure,
So-
victim for this.
Ahula
Tosfos.
Kedera.
Right.
But look at the
Ahula
Gemara
Ked-
for a moment. What's that talking about?
Right, it's talking about after Rav Nachman told get the thing for Yalta, and they ask, wait, how are you allowed to do that? Then you need to do Kriya first, because the instructions seem to be without Kriya. The Gemara answers that we need that with Bishul.
Right. Good. Now going to the so the Gemara will. I mean, Tosfos quote Rashi.
Right. Holy Kadera, Piresh Bekuntris, the Rav Nachman Sirle, Kilishna Batra de Rav. So Rav Nachman holds like the second explanation of Rav, which is after the fact it's still prohibited. Uvraita Moke La Bitzli. And then that the Braita that permit that I think this is in the Gemara that permits eating without tearing refers to tzli kidichti v'veshlu haPesach, and it's written in they shall cook the Pesach, but we means by roast the Pesach. B'divrei yamim ve'ein zeh dochak, and this is not forced. Zahachi nami mokmina b'perakim koro la'achar bishulo hainu achar tzliato. Because we later learn that he tears it without cooking it. That means after he roasts it. So he sort of defends Rashi's
Yeah.
explanation of
Right.
it. there.
One occurrence is an anomaly. Two occurrences is foolproof. Foolproof.
Right.
Go on. The Eno wrote
The Eino wrote to Lomar, de Savar Lagamre, Kilishna Batra, Daha Mekeltfe, Afilu Milishna Kama Deshare, Afilu Chachila. Elef Nitnin Savar Kilishna Batra, de Kevel Deshari Rav Nachman Latzli, Lechachila Blokria, Imken Hadiktane Koro, Hainla Kadera, Kedemar Hacha. So, and when Rashi says that he holds like the second Lishna, he doesn't really mean that. Because in this case, presumably with regard to roasting, Rav Nachman's even more lenient than the first version of Rav, because Rav Rav Nachman permits it here like fully, afilu lechachila, while the comma is sort of in like a b'diavad case. But rather with regard to the explaining the Mishnah, where it's talking about that the klal needs kriya, that's when he holds like the Lishna Batra with regard to bishul. Because since Rav Nachman holds that with regard to sli, it's permitted lechachila. V'chichatani lo kara elo over alav akan.
Okay, keep on going.
Yeah. Kadera, right? When he talked about Kriya, that was only for the Kadera. Kedamar, hach, as it says here. V'chikatane lo karo eno over alav, al korchach eno over alav, vasur kevan demari lekadera. So that, again, making this distinction between Bishul or Kadera and Sli, where it's, he doesn't transgress anything, that means he didn't transgress anything because it's not Doraita, but it's still forbidden because that's regard to the Kadera. So that's all just on Rashi's
You're coming on a
explanation.
big finish here. Let's go.
Right. All right. The Rabbeinu Tam Pirad Tzarich Kriyat Shativ Arev Utchu Bekoto LeKadera Hainu Kadera Im Basar to the Kadera Mashma Im Basar. So Rabbeinu Tam explains that when you need the full-blown 3 types of kriya, that's only when it's like cooking. And when he says it's in cooking in the pot, it means with other meat, because that's the implication. Because the implication of kadera is with other meat. Kidiktan im benoten tam bekadera, as we learned in the Mishnah, if he gives off tam, right, and you're only giving off tam with other pieces of meat. Aval lekadera below basar oletzli shari lechachila. But with regard to cooking bishul, that without other pieces of milk of meat, or with regard to roasting, it's permitted lechachila b'kriyaksa with just a little bit of.
And why is that allowed? Do you think only a kriya katsat? Because it seems to me like a controllable situation in general, in terms of what happens once it hits the tzali process, or a kader without basar. This is controllable. What's uncontrollable, because we don't know all the factors, is when there's the meat that comes out that hits another pit. So therefore, we have to be very machmir to not rely on a halachic reasoning, but create a mitzias, and that there's no milk. We took care of it. We got rid of the milk. Okay, I'm sorry for interrupting.
Right,
Okay.
but that doesn't really explain why you need a kriya katsat at all.
In other words, you wouldn't even need a kriya katsat.
Right.
The kriya katsat is that you're living in the hope that the kriya katsat did its job, but we don't. Okay, that's what I would say, and it's the only way I could come up with it. Okay, go on. The Tama
dehachmiru ba im habasar lefi tam hachalav nichnas bevasar tam habasar v'yesh tam basar b'chalav. And so the reason that they were stringent with regard to when it's with meat is because the milk goes out, enters the meat, and it changes the tam of the basar, and it becomes the flavor of basar b'chalav. Therefore, the sages decreed on this, that it sort of like has a quasi deoraita status, I guess is what you want to say. That's totally forbidden, even though it's not deoraita. Ukeshe'en habasar im hakachal bekatera afal pi shelo karosh shekaroksa lechachila mutar. And when there's no other milk, when there's no other meat, if with the kal in the pot, then even if you don't do the twofold tearing, but if you only did a little, it's permitted lechachila. The ein beina. od b'kachal k'moshe yakodem, because the milk is no longer visibly present in the kachal like it was beforehand. Ve'afal pi shenifla v'chozer v'nivla tocha kachal lo gazru bo chachamim kevan she'ein shas acher ve'lo nishta tamo shel kachal mipnei bliazo ve'lo ate lemecha basar b'chalav u'v'diavad share afil lo karo klal. And even though when it's just the klal itself, the milk does come out a little bit and then re-enters the klal, rabbis may, since because there's no other milk, the tam of the klal didn't change at all, because it's essentially the same as it was as before. And based on this, someone is not going to come to eat real basar b'chalav, and therefore b'diavad it's permitted to tear even a little bit.
So that's a great chiddush. It was all before we were talking about that the chalav as it leaves and then comes back, it's as if it's an alien chalav, and or a chalav on its own. Excuse me, a chalav on its own. It's chalav on its own. So you have a problem with basar chalav, but why? Okay, it's on a drabanan level, but it's still a basar. But he says, what's the eager part of basar chalav? That there's a time. There's no time, or it's the same to me. There's the same time. Nothing happens. That's what it said. Nothing happens.
Right. There has to be a change.
A change in the time.
Something
right.
has to change its flavor. And the kachal already has a taste of milk and meat in it. So nothing really happened. But when there's other meat there that was previously totally regular meat, it now became like kachal meat. And so there was a change, and therefore that's similar to, people are going to confuse that with cooking milk and meat, because they change the milkiness of that meat, which doesn't happen when you only cook kachal by itself. That's a new answer. That's not what I was saying.
That's terrific. I think it's terrific. I think it's terrific. Anyway, let's. We need one or two more lines.
There's an interesting correction to Tosfot that says, so the other way around, that the taste of the basar enters the chalav. So just like an interesting correction, which I thought.
Yeah, or they enter each other. Okay, good. Okay, two more lines.
Right. Ve'en chiluk ben tzli l'kadera below basar, dein bo shum tam lahakel b'tzli yoter b'tzli nami no tefach alav v'nofel al kachal mibachutz v'chozer b'nivlav kivalo kach poto ela bedam aval
okay, stop there.
All right. So the main point here is that there's no distinction between tzli and bishul without other meat. In both cases, you don't have the absorption factor. Therefore, you don't need to do a full-blown.
Or even when it absorbs, in other words, he says that you can have absorption. Is that the juice falls on the returns and falls on the meat outside, but there's no problem because it's the same time. No transformation, no change of time. Okay, we're going to stop here. There's more. It's a very good Tosfos. There's more to be said here, but we're going to stop here, and we're going to go to the Rif. And the Rif is on Lamed Chet Amud Aleph. Lamed Chet in the Dapei HaRif. And we'll look at the Rif, we'll look at the Ran for a little bit. There's a couple of repetitions here. In the Gemara, because of the mission on the bottom, the Kachal Koro Motzias Chalvo, Lo Koro Eno Avera Love, right? We got that. Please look at the Ran on the left-hand side in the Vilna. Eno Avera Love, excuse me. I'm sorry, it's quoting really not the Mishnah, it's quoting the Breita. Amar Rabbi Zera, Amar Rav, going back to the Gemara. Amar Rav, lo koro eino aver lav umutar. Okay? Eino aver lav umutar. Eino over midiraisa umutar midrabanan. It's kind of a funny thing, but because there is no deraisa, but okay. But it's, the mutar midrabanan. Mishum dafil chadchila bachila lo mitzar. Dafil nischat mimenu v'yatza. In other words, it looks like milk. It's being squeezed and it's coming out. I'm reading the Gemara. Dechalav shchuta lo mitzar ela midrabanan. So he backs his way into it, but it's a drabanan factor. V'hai kaven the muvla below peirash. It's absorbed and it has not moved. I think when we said taste, we said transformation, but the word we kind of missed out is peirash. You have to have things that are exuded. That's referring to the lo peirash. Tafil iser rabbanan leka, v'hai damer rabbanan koro mishum. So why do we have korea? Mishum sarach basar b'chalav. Anybody want to translate sarach? Adhesion of the basar to the challah. By the way, sarach also means adhesion of an isur. So I'm not sure which one. In other words, it's not the real isur, but it's like an isur. Here we have both. Here we have the milk still clinging to the basar, and we have the whole isur, which is drabanan, clinging, the chalav, as it were, as an isur, clinging as a clinging halacha. I think it's still part of the argument of why we take it so seriously. Mishum srach basar b'chalav the amar inami kedei shelo yargil b'chalav shchuta the mitzar midrabanan. In other words, it still fits in. It says it well. The Ran, it fits in to the whole reason of having this issue is because it's so close to chalav of basar b'chalav. You know what? It's almost the Isur of basar b'chalav. It's like a sarach of the chalav to the basar. It's a sarach basar, the Isur basar b'chalav, and which he gives it two separate reasons. It allows us to get confused, and who knows, play around with the exude and everything else. So they play around this religious person. Then to the next page.
Right. I think we could also use. I think we could also use this answer to explain a little bit why Tosfot required the ksak kriya, meaning these answers would just.
So go ahead, do it.
Right. Both of these answers. Well, first of all, right, there is still the srach of basar b'chalav, right? Even though it's not a full-blown prohibition, it appears like it. And number two, we don't want people to become accustomed for basar shchuta. So by tearing in a case when it would actually be permitted anyway, you totally avoid that circumstance.
Perfect. Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, you saved us. What have you done today? You saved us. That's good. You gave an answer. Excellent. Now I want to pick up on the case of Yalta, Lamed Chet Amud Beit. Maybe before that. So let's see, could you pick up on Kesed Koro, 5 lines down in the in the riff,
Yeah. Kesed Koro, Amar Rav Yehuda, Koro Shvi v'Arev v'Tachul Kotel, Amar Le, V'Ladad Shmaya, Karali, V'Anichu, my Kamash Malan.
Hey, Alexi, we can barely hear you. Talk a little louder.
I'm talking pretty loud. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Like maybe your microphone is on low or something.
I don't know.
We will
Right.
listen. Go ahead.
So my kamashmalan madnitim hi hakamashmalan delo ba'inan shti ba'arev. So like either that like it's teaching us that you just need like a kriya alma, that you don't need shti ba'arev. Inami like dera. Behilchta hecha dekar shti ba'arev tchia bekotel shari lishtole b'dera. Becha dolo avid lehachi shari lematvia. I think that's how you Menukat. I know like the way is to roast. So like the alternative thing, either we're saying like in general you don't need like shtia b'arev, that's what like what the Mishnah is telling you, or you can say that like the big dera thing is making this like kind of distinction between, as we've been talking about, what it means to cook this in ekdera versus to roast it, saying that if I want to cook it in a pot, I can only the chachila do that, and the Rif according to this reading says like there's a way which you could say if I did the whole shebang, I can the chachila cook this in a pot, but not if I just did like kriya b'alma. Whereas to roast, I would just need to tear it like cold. And Amar lehu Rav Nachman letavche ziku krale lialta. So he told his like chef to like roast kral for Yalta. Anan korotnan. Like, didn't we say that you also need to tear it? And he didn't seem to tell that to his chef. He's like, oh, well, that was like for the ktera. Didn't we use like bidi eved language, implying that like bidi eved, if you did cook a kral, it's not necessarily forbidden, but like you shouldn't lechatchila do it. Huadin dafilu lechatchila mishum dekabay lemitnei seifa kevasha bashla. No, actually, there are lechatchila ways of cooking a kral, and it just used b'diavad language because the bit with the kiva is b'diavad scenario.
So did you go Bahachi Sage? Did you say that? The last line? Well, I'm sorry, how far did you get? I'm sorry, I just lost my place.
At the top of Lamed Tat Amud Aleph.
Okay, oh, so you got as far as that. Okay, let's stop there. So, but we need one more thing in the riff. Amar lahu Rav Nachman. Did we do the full riff on the page?
I read that bit.
Yeah, okay, sorry. I'm sorry for missing. Okay, yeah, shikoyach on that. Let me try to be masakem as much as I can. Rashi, Rabbeinu Tam, and the riff. Okay, at least I have the help that I wrote some notes to myself. So Rashi, the major chiluk for Rashi, going to Rashi now, is whether it's the major, I won't say chiluk, major variable, but the major chiluk for Rashi is whether it's, we're talking about tzvi or mevusha. So let's first talk about tzli according to Rashi. Rashi says, tzli, chachila, we have to cut the chachal in order to get out the ikar chalav. Now I say ikar chalav because not all milk will leave this way. And for that you would need ticha, but Rashi does not necessarily say that you must do ticha, but it's sufficient because in the tzali process, the milk is burnt up, or that milk which didn't leave is still back as part of the basar. So Rashi says this for tzali. There are others who say, according, in terms of Shitas Rashi, and that's, I kind of understood it from the Tosos, that the either or, either orcho or rochvo, either that's Hebrew, either the warp or the woof, either woof or the warp, or the how do we say it in Hebrew, even shisi, shati, and arev, either one. And the Rush also confirms this, also confirmed in the Torah. We know that because it's brought in the Beis Yosef. Beis Yosef, and the Torah tells us about this. I'm sorry. Rashi and Torah say it's fine. Tosos write it in, Shati o Orev. The Ran, Bet also says this. Also, okay. Ticha b'kotel doesn't seem to be needed for tzli, according to Rashi. In fact, he explicitly says you don't need that because it's good enough having the completeness of the warp and the woof. And that seems to follow the Gemara when Rabbi Elazar says to the Shamish, "Karali v'ano yichul," cut it up for me, and I will do that. There's no ticha there, even though Rabbi Yehuda later on says there's ticha. Okay, but b'diavad, if he saw without koro at all, it is still mutter b'achila. We're still reviewing Rashi for ki hachalav sheniflat mimeno be'eit hatzliya note because the chalav falls down, it falls on the flame. The nisraf ba'esh is burned up in the fire. It's not ve'eno choser the nivla the and you have to have no worry about that. And that which does remain and does not exude does not have the shem chalav. Commentaries on Rashi said it doesn't have shem chalav. In that case, the chachamim did not oser the remaining milk. So if that's the case, why do we do kriya for Rashi? The Levush says, well, we want to cut down on the little amount of milk that still might remain. It's the belts besides having the suspenders, according to the Levush. Maybe it will still cut it down. The Ran seems to hint at that, but no, the Quran says differently, as we said, and we talked about, because he said it's srach basar b'chalav, which is either the milk adhering to the meat, or it's the adherence of this halacha that we want to be as strict as possible in that case. Shelo yargu b'chalav, we just saw it a couple of minutes ago. Shelo yargu b'chalav shechuta, the meats are midrabanan. There's still an iser. It's an Isur D'Rabbanan. So let's do this. Let's do this Kriya. That is Rashi on the Sully process. What does Rashi that says Bim Ba Levashla? What about the case of Bishul? Even so Rashi says even it's levado. There's no other meat. Okay, there's no basar acher. You still have to do the kriya fully, la'orcho rachmo to the shasi and the arev, and also Rashi says in the case of bishul, l'tocho neged koisel, you had to press it against the wall, and if he does not do so, then even b'diavad it is usher, because he's really worried about it. It is usher, and not only is it usher, it is oser. For in bishul process, as we all know, the milk is poresh from the flesh of the kachal, and it is chalav gomor midrabanan. This is as far as you can go, and it's not burnt. It returns to be absorbed. No good. Here's a major yesod. Tell me if I'm wrong. In Rashi's thinking. The major yesod is the difference if milk was expressed from the kachal outward after shechita, as opposed to not being expressed at all. For if it is not expressed, in other words, it's still in the meat, then it doesn't have shem chalav. This is another way. This is a kind of a brisker understanding. The one thing that has happened is that it's gotten a shem chalav. In fact, I would say now, that's been a source of confusion for us. If it's not really chalav, why are we calling it chalav? So here I say it's not essentially, maybe that's what I meant. As a chefza, it's not essentially chalav, but it has the shem chalav. And therefore that has to count for something, it has to count for the damage. For when it's expressed, there's only an Isur Drabanan, it's chav shchuta, therefore when it's not expressed, we don't think of it at all, but it had achieved before the shem chalav, and I don't want to go against that. Anything else I want to say? Fine. One thing, so therefore his big difference is between Sali and Bishul. And in Sali, there's no reabsorption, and therefore there's no problem. And in Bishul, the milk really leaves, has gained the shame chalav. It has now shame chalav. I have to find out where I got this. Remembering this from Shir. I hope it's not just me. It has a shame chalav, and by having a shame chalav, when it returns, it's reabsorbs. There's an isur. There's an isur if we haven't done a full kriya and a ticha, and it would make it also even d'Rabbanan, even b'diavad, what else I want to say about here? Yeah. And when you say it's also b'diavad, even b'diavad, that's the chal itself and all that which is the kedera. Unless there's a shir samach. But the shir samach is always the safety net. They're not talking about that. So now, if the chal, question on Rashi's position. If the kachal is cooked, if the chal is now recooked or is cooked with basar acher, with his other basar, but nonetheless, the kachal itself has had a full kriya and a full ticha, what's the problem? Why do they say there's an Easter? Really, what's the problem? And I think they're the two things that are possible. Still, it's the shem chalav, but I just beat that around a lot. The shem chalav, but I still think something which you mentioned earlier, maybe it still has tam chalav, or maybe it has the lachit of chalav, something that remains, which means I don't have a better answer. I have the answer either that it's the way that I said it, that it either has the shem chalav or it's tam chalav. Rabbeinu Tam. What's the deal with Rabbeinu Tam? He makes no difference between tzola hakachal levado, without basar acher, and mevashel levado, without any other basar, bishul and that, because it's saved. It's the tzli process itself saves it from any problem, and we don't have to really worry about it. So even if the milk has separated from the chal and then returns, it is still mutter, and he's against Rashi, for whom, against mutter. For him, both Sli and Bishul are mutter. His chiluk, the chiluk of Rabbeinu Tam, is whether it is the chiluk between Bishul and Sli without basar acher, even though the milk exudes, it returns to be absorbed. But if what we saw, if the flavor of the kachal hasn't changed, is the same as before. He accepts the notion of tam chalav, which we don't see at all within Rashi. And since there is if there's basar acher, then we're really worried that we'll learn to do basar b'chalav from this. But if the basar and the chalav in some fashion has the same time, then in many ways it's almost the same chepsa. My terminology, it's only the same chepsa, and since it has the same time and therefore it has the same chepsa, we don't learn from other situations, from things that are also from pig or some sort of shechita that went bad and now you have it together. For even without, and therefore, it seems to me that the Rabbeinu Tam isn't so particular about kriya, because there's no Easter even b'diavad. There is a necessity for Rabbeinu Tam of a kriya beforehand, and not just before, a lachil of a kriya, either orcho or rochvo. There's no tefillah, and we need a kriya katsat. And why he needs a kriya katsat? Well, the basis of Rabbeinu Tam's theory, let me try this out, is that chalav shchuta within the kachal was forbidden by the rabbis only when it enters the basar acher, or when the basar acher enters it. But to eat the chalav with the basar kachal as it is, in other words, just the basar kachal as it is, was not forbidden. In other words, you need a transformation and transference, as we said earlier. In a case of b'diavad, it's only l'chadchila they necessitated kriya katsat, even though it's mevasha levado. But the kachal as it is, even though the milk, whatever milk it had there, separates and is reabsorbed, the taste and composition is the same. I write two exclamation marks, and therefore it is mutter, and it's considered only as. He says very nicely, Tosfos, I don't think we said it. The Easter that we've had is not an Easter basar chalav, it's only an Easter achilas kachal, reminding us of this Rabbanan standing. And therefore it's mutter even without kriya, but we do kriya. So we need kriya, and it's mutter b'diavad, and the remainder that's inside the meat, of course, is not usher. There's only when it's chalav be'en has exuded, we come back, that we say usher even b'diavad. Okay. Without any kriya for a Rabbeinu Tam, it was usher l'chadchila to cook it even levado. But even l'salato levado is also usher. But b'diavad, if it is cooked or broiled, tzali, levado, even without kriya at all, it is mutter. But it's cooked with other meat, you all know this. Basar acher without kriya, it's aser afil b'diavad, midrabanan, and it's oser kenegdo ad shishu. We need a katsat kriya. I'm repeating myself, rachbo or orcho, shasi or orev. It is mutter, in that case, it's mutter l'chatchila l'tzalato levado or levashlo levado. But in the case of cooking it without basar acher, it actually, I think without basar acher, with basar acher, is obviously asher l'chatchila. Okay. Faster with the riff. The riff. What's this chiluk? He makes a chiluk between sli and bishul. And the point is whether l'chadchila we need kriya.
I mean, he ends up saying that like for bishul, I need to do like the shtiv arev, like I need to do the whole shebang for it to be l'chadchila. Whereas I like only need like a little tearing for the tzali to be it.
That's right, because tzali is self-regulating. It gets rid. So let me finish the paragraph that I have here. B'diavad of bishlo levado, it's mutter, even there's no kriya. It's certainly counter Rashi, certainly counter Tess. What does Rif give great weight to? He gives great weight to b'diavad. And if it's levado, and if it's silly, that's his perfect case. And I'll leave it there as here. Psak. Shulchan Aruch, I would say, as you learn the Shulchan Aruch, seems to paskin like the Rif, including that even levashlo b'fnei asmo, you need kriya v'ticha. The minhag, the general minhag in the Shulchan Aruch seems to go like Rashi. So if we cook it without with basar acher, it's completely usher like Rashi. even after Kriya V'ticha. Shulchan Aruch passes like the Rif to say, L'fashla b'fnei asmo, you need Kriya V'ticha. The minhag seems to be more like Rashi, that even if you did Kriya V'ticha, but you're mevashal with basar acher, we don't want to eat that. We don't want to cook that, and we don't want to eat that. And the Ramah is firmer than everybody on everything. So yesh koach to all of you. Sorry for going a little bit late. And if you have corrections, I'd like to hear them. What we did today was really the ikar of Seifim, Aleph, and Bet. Not much on Gimel and Dal. So and all that. So yesh koach. What's up next week, Reb Nachum?
Next week is Noam, right?
Indeed. I put the Google Doc in the chat and I'll send it out right after we get on.
Okay, good. Okay.
The week after that is Shavuos.
What type of excuse is that?
Yeah, well,
Here in
do
Eretz
Chazara
Yisrael-
all night.
here in Eretz Yisrael, we're allowed to learn.
maybe if you push your computer against the wall, since it's only Rabbanan, if you
The
push it
best-
against the wall, it'll
The
be mutter.
best fellow, the real Masmidim, best, in those days was just guys. The best guys, so I found, the best guys that I knew would say after Shavuos, they all would say the same thing. Thank God Shavuos is over, now I can get back to learning.
Well,
All right, take good care.
hopefully we'll all learn well on Shavuos also.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank you.
If any of you are in town, let us know.
Thank you.
Koyach.